The Honda Civic or the Mazda 3? That's a really good question. Which one would you buy? In this video, I'm going to let you know which one I would buy based mostly on the designs. We're going to have a look at the front view, the side, and the rear. And in this case, I'm also going to throw in the interior here because it's a really cool comparison between the two, having the exterior kind of find its way into the interior and how that's visualized in both of these cars. I'm going to do that later in this video. But first of all, let's have a look at what these two cars are. So the Honda Civic was of course introduced in 1972, and it's by many considered to be the blueprint for what a compact sedan should be like. The 2022 Honda Civic is the 11th generation, and it hasn't forgotten where it comes from. For 2022, we have a brand new interior design and an exterior design, of course, with the new dialed down, more elegant look and lines than before. Personally, I think this is a huge step in the right direction, moving into a design with a more defined identity and less overstyling that we saw specifically in the previous generation Honda Civic compared to this one, like night and day when it comes to the overstyling here. The 2022 Civic comes in 4 different trims and 2 engine options. You have the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine generating 158 horsepower and 138 pound-feet of torque, while the more powerful 1.5-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine develops 180 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. With the 2-liter engine, the Civic receives about 31 miles per gallon in the city and 40 highway. Despite the 1.5-liter turbo engine being more powerful both in horsepower and torque, it still has a better fuel economy with 33 miles to the gallon in the city and 42 on the highway. Now, compared to the Honda Civic here, the Mazda 3 feels like a newcomer still in this segment because it was introduced in 2003 compared to 1972 for the Honda Civic, and the current 2022 Mazda 3 is on its 4th generation, which was unveiled in 2019. It has almost the same exact exterior dimensions as the Civic. However, the Mazda 3 does have a slightly more cramped interior, specifically in the rear, in the back seat. It feels a lot smaller than the Civic when you look at the legroom back there. You do get more engine options with the Mazda 3. There is a 2-liter 4-cylinder only found in the base model, and this makes 155 horsepower and 150 pound-feet of torque. There's also a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder making 186 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. Top of the line, the third and last option, is a 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder making 227 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. Mazda offers both front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive for the 3. However, you can only choose between the two on the mid 2.5-liter engine. The base 2-liter engine is only offered in front-wheel drive, and the top-of-the-line 2.5-liter turbo is only available in all-wheel drive. Both of these vehicles, both the 2022 Civic and the 2022 Mazda 3 here, they start around $21,000 for the very base model. However, the 2022 Civic can climb up to $28,300 for the loaded touring version, and the top-of-the-line 2.5-liter turbo premium plus Mazda 3 will cost you $32,600. But now let's jump into Photoshop here and let's have a look at this design here, because it is a very interesting approach from both of these companies, and I think both of them are very, very beautiful cars. I can't say that of the previous generation of the Mazda 3 or the Honda Civic. As I said, I thought the Honda Civic was way over stylized when it comes to specifically the Type R of the previous generations. You had angles not connecting with anything and lines not having a connection in the front or the rear. Add a bunch of vents, fake vents and wings onto the design, and that was the Honda Type R. But this generation Civic here looks super clean compared to the previous generation. I'm a huge fan of the front view here as well, which we're going to talk about right here. So let's have a look at what this actually is here. So we have this section right here in which is housing the entire front graphics in the front face of this car, and it's a traditional looking front face, but at the same time I think it's a kind of a strong brand identity here for Honda, specifically when we look at the grille section here. So you have these lines going down here, and then you have this dip here of the bodywork going into the grille and kind of creates this fold, reaches all the way down to half the height of the logo right here, which is something I don't think I've seen that before, and it's specific for the I think this is only available on the base Honda Civic. If you look at the SI, for example, it doesn't really reach down all the way down here. It still has a little bit of a fold like this, but it doesn't reach down all the way like it does here on the base model. And then you have these very simplistic headlights with a simple daytime running light right here, which is recognizable, I would say, as a Honda because of the angles right here and how this then goes into the line of the grille here. And at the bottom we have this inverted mouth that was introduced with the Subaru Tribeca, because before the Tribeca it was kind of revolutionary. It's not really a big model for Subaru. I don't think it's a good looking model, but for this section right here they really introduced this upside down grille. Before the Tribeca, the lower part of the grills usually had this angle right here, as you can see from pretty much every single car from the 90s all the way to mid 2000s until this Tribeca design was introduced, and now a lot of brands have that on the vehicles as well. And this then connects to these side housings of the fog lights right here. It's just a simple, beautiful design that I think Honda did a very good job, and I can't wait to see the Type R and how they're gonna implement, or if they're gonna implement more stuff onto the design, or if they're still gonna keep it kind of restrained like this by just adding some performance parts onto the car. That's kind of the approach that I hope they will go. Now let's have a look at the Mazda here. Also a very beautiful front end, but a very different approach here. So if we have a look at the lines here on the Mazda, it's a lot more organic. There's a lot more curvatures going on and angles right here, but it doesn't look over stylized, and that's what I think Mazda does really well. They have a very clear brand identity here as well, with the lines that specifically framing of the grille, it instantly recognizable as a Mazda. And then you have this simple slot at the bottom right here with some body surfacing right here going on, some bends and curvatures and smoothness in the surfacing. There are not a lot of sharp lines here on the Mazda 3, and I like that. There are just a few key sharp lines. For example, we have this line going into the hood right here, also on the other side right here, but no sharp shoulder line. And what I love about the hatchback specifically is that it completely lacks a shoulder line, and that's a new approach to how you can design a shoulder line by not simply having one at all. And I think it actually works with these surfaces right here. However, you still have this line down here to kind of catch this massive surface of smoothness. Just have one sharp line at the bottom to have it as a base for what the car is built on. You also have a semi-sharp angle or curvature right here, a line going into the headlight right there. Looking at these two, comparing these two, this is a more horizontal and vertical design of the graphics in the front end and around the car, which you're going to have a look at in just a second. While this Mazda down here, still more organic, more fluid design, but at the same time, as I said, not over stylized. So let's have a look at the rear view, and lastly the side view, and then the interior. What I said about this when it first came out is I thought that the taillights, they look a little oversized for the overall proportions of the rear end. But I've seen this now out in the wild a couple of times, and it kind of melts in better when you see it in real life. It's just some photo thing, I guess, that when you see this car in photos, the first thing that really popped into my mind was that the taillight, they look so big. And I made a redesign on this on the Sketch Monkey channel where I just shrunk them down a little bit, and I think it looks better, but this still looks good. And I think the big taillights, they kind of suit this segment, and because it makes the car look smaller than what it is, and I think maybe that's what Honda was going for. And we also have this sharp shoulder line right here that goes into the graphics of the taillight, as you can see here, which I really appreciate. I like when the taillights and the graphics of the car play along with the major body lines in the car, and we have that going right here. So you have the shoulder line going here into this LED taillight right here, which then creates the trunk, and then of course goes around on the other side right here. And you also have this line down here, very traditional lines here, lines that we've seen for maybe 10-15 years, but they still work well here. And then this part right here is what I thought looked like the Cadillac CT5. It's almost like a copy of the CT5 treatment of the graphics of the very end of the window right there. It's interesting to compare the two. I'm not sure who came up with that idea first, or if they even took inspiration from each other, or it was just a coincidence, but it's very interesting to see that. And then we have this curvature up here, which I really like as well. So we have some curvature in the rear end to kind of send off this design right here in a pretty cool way, even in the base model right here. So having a look at the Mazda, you can see that it still has this flowing, more organic design. There's no sharp shoulder line right here. We have a bit of a shoulder, but you can barely see it. And also these curvatures right here, very smooth. It's a very smooth design right here. And also the graphics as well. They're not very connected to the body lines, but that's okay, because this is Mazda's design approach for this generation 3. You can see it, I think, more clearly in the Mazda 3 hatchback. If you take the Mazda 3 hatchback and you add some custom wheels on it, it's one of the best looking hatchbacks I've ever seen. It's a beautiful design. I prefer the hatchback more than the sedan, but since we're comparing the Honda Civic sedan, I decided to choose the 3 sedan here as a comparison because it makes more sense. And then we have this similar line as we have on the Civic right here, but it doesn't really connect to this part right here like it does on the Civic up there. It's just by itself down here with no connection to the front or the rear. But as I said, it still works for some reason. It's a very interesting design here. Both of these designs, two completely different approaches to the design, but they still work really well in their own fashion or in their own philosophy. So this is clear, I think, more clearly visualized in the side view right here. If we have a look at the lines of the Civic, for example, we have the strong shoulder going from the front right here, stretching all the way back into the graphics of the taillight right here, as we talked about. And you also have this line down here connecting the front right here to the center and to the rear end as well. And you have the now, which they talked about a lot on the release, is that the A-pillar sits a little further back now, so we have more of a longer hood here, which creates a more sportier dimension than the previous generation Honda Civic. And looking at the Mazda 3 here, just look at how beautifully sculpted this section in the middle is here. It's very beautifully done, and then you have this sharp baseline to kind of hold everything up and create a foundation for the design. No sharp lines up here in the body, but that's okay. As I said, Mazda's philosophy is to have smooth lines and then just a couple of sharp lines in the design, which they have here on the 3 and the hatchback as well. But you can see that it is a beautiful design. It's a clear sedan. There's no kind of trying to be a hatchback or something like that. You have a clear boot, and you also have a decent size hood here as well, which create a sporty look by moving the A-pillar back a little further than, for example, if this was an EV, the greenhouse would stretch all the way down here, and then we would have this blobness that is so common for EVs these days. And that's why I prefer the overall proportions of the internal combustion engine cars still to this day, just for that simple reason. I'm not really a fan of the blobbiness of EVs. But last but not least, let's have a look at the interiors here. So if we have a look at the front view and the rear, the side of these cars, how these designs and lines translate into the interior, we can still see that we have a lot of horizontal and vertical graphics right here in the Honda Civic. It's very interesting to see how the outside translates into the interior. There is not a lot of curvatures here, and I kind of like this. It looks clean, it looks classy for a Honda Civic to have these horizontal and vertical lines. It makes it look like it makes it feel like a more luxury car than if you have a lot of overstyled pieces and curvatures and angles in the interior. And comparing it to the Mazda 3 here, also same thing here. It's very interesting because they are so different, but I like them both in their own unique ways. Here you have a lot more fluid lines going in right here, and you also have that in the center console right here, as you can see. Just look at how, I think the key feature here is how this display is integrated in both of these models. You have an angle here, you have a different angle on this side, and then you have an angle on the base as well, while on the Honda Civic you have a very static looking rectangle like that. So in the end, if I had to pick one, which one would I choose? Well, it's pretty easy here, because here in this case, if we talk about the sedans, I would go for the Honda Civic sedan because I think it's a really good looking car, and I think you can also get it with a sport package which adds a little black ducktail, and you also have a black diffuser and black side skirts, and I think that brings another dimension of sportiness to the design and just emphasizes the lines even more. However, if we're talking about the hatchback, I'm not a huge fan of the Honda Civic hatchback at all in the rear end. I think it's not as clean, nowhere near as clean as the sedan, while the Mazda 3 hatchback is one of my favorite hatchbacks in modern times. So if we were talking hatchbacks here, then it would also be a very simple choice, and I will go for the Mazda 3 hatchback. But in this case, since we're talking about the sedans, there's no other choice for me than to pick the Honda Civic sedan.